When you're a writer, it's an ideal world. You can create anything that you want to. But that translation from the written page to reality, therein lies the nature of my job. My sole function in life is to make what George wants physically happen. One thing I knew from the beginning was that Anakin was from Tatooine. There's no way you can really physically recreate that in any stage environment or even backlot environment. You have to go there. So very early on, Gavin and I went on a location scout to Tunisia. And we found an area in Tozur. We figured if we went about 15, 20 miles outside of the city, in the middle of the desert, we could build our own town and make it as big as George wanted to do.
That's it. Tatooine.
Tatooine is a key planet. Of course, it's where Anakin, where we discover Anakin. And as it relates to the whole Star Wars universe, it's really the center of where it all starts. To actually have the opportunity to go back and build on those designs was fantastic. Of course, George wanted to push the boundaries even further, and so we took the design philosophy established by Ralph McQuarrie and others and started to really think, okay, how would this society actually function? I basically took, Luke's homestead, which is a really elegant design, and just extrapolated it out.
Okay, so these are all the pieces we get to play with.
We could use that as the cafe, and just redress it, take that side. The question sort of becomes, how much more do we need?
We're talking about building this in Tozur now, right?
Yes.
There's a wonderful art director that we hired called Ben Scott, and we put him in charge of setting up the huge construction job of building virtually a city in the middle of the desert. Is this where the cafe would be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the cafe here. This is where Sebulba has a confrontation.
The movement of a crew to a location, it's like moving a small platoon across the desert. It's a campaign. And that brings a lot of complications, but it's really like war now.
And turn over. 26 George, take 2, A camera.
And action!
Tatooine's the only location in Episode 1 that we visit that's shared from the original trilogy, and so it was important to me that it still kind of feel like the same planet.
One of the problems about Episode 4, A New Hope, was that none of the records really remained for Tunisia. They hadn't had an opportunity to really find all the locations before they went there. They were on the move from the main part of Tunisia to a little island called Jerba, and no one had kept accurate records of where every single location was. And since we were not replicating them, but we were going to be in the same world, we wanted to try and find an area that would be much simpler than Episode 4 was to shoot. And we needed to find an area that would combine all the elements of all the disparate locations that they went to. As it turned out, there was a very interesting article that had been given to me at Lucasfilm about a young guy who was getting his PhD. He was an archaeologist, and he decided to make archaeology very fun. So his thesis was written on where were the original locations on Episode 4. And as soon as I read it, I realized he was the only guy. He'd spent months and months in the desert tracking down every single location. So I called him up. He was a really nice guy. And we sent him out to Tunisia, and we met him there. He immediately proceeded to show us where all of the locations, because all of us were obviously not on the original Star Wars. When we were traveling with David throughout all the areas, there was one little section in Jerba whereas the main cantina was, and it had been rebuilt. It was a brand new modern street. I mean, there were basically condominiums surrounding it, and there was no way to actually picture where the original cantina was. But David knew precisely where it was because he had been there years before, and we were trying to talk to someone, and he took us into his garden. And as we were walking into his house, we saw one of the original cupolas in his garden, which he was now growing vegetables in. And we suddenly started to discover pieces, and we found the actual original cantina door about a quarter of a mile away, and it was being used as a door to protect a chicken farm. It was just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. We saw it in the middle of nowhere. So there are little pieces, and we saw an older man, maybe in his late 80s, walking down the street with the original Star Wars t-shirt, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that that was probably worth $10,000 now.
Tunisia was a very difficult location, mostly because of the temperature. We ended up shooting starting end of July into the first part of August, when Anakin and Shmi are saying goodbye. That sequence, it was 126.5 degrees when we shot that scene. Those are temperatures I've never experienced before, and I hope I never experience again.
See ya. Sugar. Na 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 na. How you doing? It was too hot yesterday.
They said it gets hotter than that.
Yeah. This is suicide Fortnite, unless you've heard.
How are you doing?
I'm cool for now. Just waiting for it to get hot.
That's about gift of shoe.
The trick part of that is going to be the most difficult one. He won't be here, and neither will Saboba.
Well, this one then I'll just move in. Huh?
Yeah, well.
Okay.
Thank you. It's getting smaller.
طب كلمة تمشوا منها تمشوا طول المريض.
Ready?
I'm ready. I was born.
Okay. Turn over. 26, Jules, take 2A camera. Hey, you! That'll be 7 druggets.
Well, I'd say cut.
Cut! Cut!
George?
Yeah?
It's only that whip pan, and I guess if you saw him there, then you wouldn't believe he would have gone for the frog, so I would say no vendor, right?
I would say no vendor. We're going to widen up a little bit, but I still don't think you'll see it.
Okay.
No vendor.
No vendor.
Pas de vendeur.
How you doing?
I'm hot.
I can imagine.
But
I'm hot too.
But I'm cool. You know what I'm saying?
I wish I could say the same. Kind of.
It's so hot. My mother's in New York. She feels it.
Especially when it's like this, you mustn't take the fun out of it. The only thing we're all suffering here is the heat. And there's a lot of people who pay to come to this sort of temperature and have a holiday. So if you can just get people to think that this is a temporary break in their holiday for 10 hours or 12 hours, then they'll have a good time.
The first full-size set that was started 2 weeks ago is Anakin's interior. I think that'll be the first set that George will see in about 5 or 6 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Added an extra little alcove on this side and the doorway straight out.
It should feel smaller.
So definitely bring the ceiling down.
Yeah, I would bring the whole thing down and make it, kind of a little hobble-ish.
We're 8 weeks away from production now. Well, we're 8 weeks away from shooting, and the adrenaline's pumping, and we're churning things out as though there's no tomorrow.
When you got to have this finished by?
Tomorrow.
You'll need to bend a tube there and the intermediate one in here.
Yes.
Rake up here, we're going to put a decking up here.
Yeah.
And that forms our platform.
Excellent.
Anakin's hobble was quite an interesting one because obviously it was back in Tatooine and George wanted it to have a certain feel of the homestead from Star Wars.
The look of the movie is very, very important, and you want to develop a look that doesn't call attention to itself, that is very natural, but is very unusual at the same time, and gives you this sense of an otherworldly situation. So we can take this out,
yes,
and then we can sort of dress,
and use it for real.
Dress this with
junk
parts, and
yeah,
whatnot, which would be great. That would look good.
George was saying, you know, let's make it like any 9-year-old kid's bedroom. But of course, he lives in Tatooine, which is kind of slightly different. If you don't mind, I'd just like to wander around a couple of the sets.
Yep, we're ready. Okay, we are.
Just you?
Yeah. Well, I saw some of the photos of the set starting to go up.
Yep.
Home sweet home. All right, great.
Okay.
We've never dared go this far, but
it's sort of the first intimate area you've had, almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We never saw Luke's
bedroom or anything. Yeah.
You know, it is important that we make this a warm boys' room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
It's only 9.
I'm not sure about a closet, but we could
hang around on the bed.
Well, you could put a closet over there.
In our 20th century environment, the majority of things just blend in. It's not until you lay on your bed and you start to count all those different bits and pieces that you got there that go to make up your own set at home that you realise that you're actually recreating an environment like that, but in a completely different world.
72, take 19, pick up my big cameras.
Maybe I could do that on camera.
Okay, 1216, Gawley.
Yeah. That's on the second. Run over. 76 Baker, take 2 AMB cameras. And action.
I think you have. Why else would you be here?
I can see there's no fooling you, Anakin. You mustn't let anyone know we're here. We're on our way to Coruscant, the central system in the Republic, on a very important mission, and it must be kept secret.
Coruscant?
Cut. Let's try it again.
That's okay. Up, please.
Well, there's some pieces in there. Print that one. Okay, why don't we try one without you even dealing with your food, so you just can focus on your line.
No, it's not the food that's a problem. It's me always. I'm used to saying Coruscant.
All right.
Not Coruscant.
Coruscant. If you mispronounce it, it's okay.
No, everybody will start laughing.
No, nobody's done that.
Go towards the edge on that line.
And it's hard to know exactly where it's gonna trip itself up in a funny kind of way. Because in some stuff, I feel like that emotional scene with his mother, he was like right on the button every single time he did it. You don't quite know what you're gonna get, and it's different every time, and sometimes it's really special, so you don't want to grind it into the ground.
Okay, Jane, take your position, please. Stand by.
I don't think they're gonna need to build anything. I mean, they need to build just a little tiny bit of the ramp on a blue screen set.
The effects work is mostly set extensions. So when the Queen ship is parked in the desert, we really just had the ramp there. Any of the wider views was an 8-foot-long miniature that we had of the ship and splitting that all in.
George talked about wanting to have a large chrome ship, a very Art Deco-ish, fast-looking form. And we had some SR-71 Blackbird model kits. We were taking them and cutting off the noses and putting the bodies together and experimenting with that. And George saw the box and said, do that. And if you look at it, you can plainly see that it's inspired by the SR-71. A concept model, there was a small foam one built that was maybe 5-6 inches long to get the basic buy-off on proportion shape, just to see if everybody was on the same page. That got approved and then went to a larger model that was about maybe a little over 2 feet long. And that was fully detailed, had these long spikes coming off the back of it, and we had it sent it out, had it chromed. Chrome's really a difficult thing because the full-size model we built was 11 feet long. We're trying to figure out how we're going to get that kind of surface on it. There wasn't a tank big enough to chemically plate it or to vacuum plate it. So Mylar was the selection we came up with, and they did some tests with a couple of the Naboo fighters and took some 2-inch Mylar tape and just kind of stuck it everywhere. And if you look at them up close, they're really crude, but on film it looks great.
At the moment, we're finding problems with the adhesion. However, we're sure we'll be able to achieve what they want.
Our model is going to be scrutinized much more closely. So we went to a heavier Mylar from 3M that was, I think, 30 inches wide. The Mylar kind of only wants to go in one direction. It doesn't like compound curves. If you try to just put it over a dome, it wouldn't work. On the Queen ship, there was enough of a compound curve to it that we'd come back in the mornings, and the mylar would have peeled symmetrically on it and create these little puckers. And so each day we would cut those to relieve the structure of it.
Symmetry by hand is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do. By using 3D models and having a CNC machine sculpt it out, one thing that's cool about it is you can actually just make half the ship and then mirror image it and you get exact duplicate mirror image. We actually shot it up on the roof of the ILM shooting stage so that we wouldn't get any phone poles and things. And so in the background was actually the sky of the Bay Area. The camera crews, they had to cover their areas up so that you wouldn't see the camera reflected into it.
To see it go from a concept painting and then see scenes with the actors in Tunisia with a ramp and then to composite that with our miniature looks pretty amazing. It's always interesting when you combine all those elements and this magic happens where it suddenly becomes this, 200-foot long spaceship and people running out of the door and you realize it was just shot up on top of the main stage on a tabletop.
George pointed out that the thing about Tatooine is the skies aren't blue, that they actually have a grayness to them. And when we were in Tunisia, he's exactly right. You have this kind of yellowish dust that gets swept up into the sky and is kind of suspended in the air. And that yellowish tone of the dust neutralizes the blue of the sky and kind of adds up to a kind of a grayish horizon. And so we tried to make sure that that was always present in the shots that we did. We had set extensions inside of the Mos Espa city. The set build went up to about 12 feet, and then we extended it and made the city larger and populated it. We added droids and other creatures.
That's me?
Well, this is a Kadu, and that's Jar Jar. This is an Eope. That's what you're on right now.
The Eope it's kind of a camel-like creature, a native of Tatooine, a desert animal, clearly, that Anakin rides at some point in the film. I sculpted the original concept maquette. In the case of a lot of the characters, sometimes the team would give me orthographic views. That's like a straight side view, a straight front view, a straight top view. So I had a real sense of the anatomy of the character. In the case of the Eope, I don't think the artwork was that fleshed out at the time. It was more of a concept drawing of placing Anakin on the Eope in a scene riding in the desert and kind of how it would look and feel in the film. So I was just working from that artwork. The Eope was a big challenge, but for me it was a really fun challenge. This is one of my favorite pieces of sculpture in my entire career, I have to say. First I had to create an animal, then I had to create a human sitting on the animal, and then all these little tiny details, his saddle blankets and packs and rolls, and I would use strings and threads to tie them together. So part of the challenge really was building up all those details, and which you don't get to do in a maquette that's going to be scanned for CG, but for a design concept maquette where you really want all these details. That becomes part of the challenge, but also a lot of the fun, because when you can get all these little tiny things working together, and it looks really cool at the end, it's really satisfying.
Just mounting up. So Andy's through first.
Walking, be sort of simulating the movements of a horse.
Right.
So you feel that you don't feel really secure.
What do you mean by that?
We needed an R2 that could actually go in very deep sand. We needed an R2 that could work in light sand. We needed a R2 that could go over door jams. But I think something in the fundamental design of that three-legged character has always been a difficult process.
R2 units are astrodroids. They're a spaceship mechanic that just goes along to fix the ship if it breaks down. R2-D2 has always been a problem, and it takes a lot of very clever engineering to make him reliable and make him do the things that he has to be able to do.
All we're doing is we're bringing him up to date inside, because when you look in here, it's amazing. It's a trip into the museum almost, because all this 20 years ago. We're also going to get the weight low. He was top heavy before, which I think caused him to tend to want to fall over quite easily.
Yeah.
So. We now have 7 R2-D2s. which can run on either the sand or on the stage, plus one Kenny Baker one, plus one we call the pneumatic one, which means it can go from 2 legs to 3 legs. R2-D2 actually, loving little creature that he is, turned into quite a nightmare for us. Now the first sets that we were on were Anakin's hobble, which meant R2 had to come in from outside, and the floor was uneven, so that was causing him to skid off at various angles, making him very difficult to control. The sand was getting in the chains and just locking the motors up, and they were shearing shafts and gearboxes.
Day by day, we were getting frustrated. You know, and it's one thing when you're dealing with an actor, you may do 4, 5, 6, 7 takes, but when you have a character that's been around for 20 years, that is run by a pretty simple mechanism, you expect him to be able to work.
Cut. Cut. I have bad droid karma. On Jedi, the droids just were perfect. R2 could do anything. He was amazing. We had 15 of them. And he went out in the forest. He went in the forest, in the desert, everywhere. And action. Action. Cut. Cut. Yeah, I think we'll give up on this.
Halfway through, George was pretty frustrated by having to wait around for R2. And it frustrated all of us because we spent so much effort and time and money trying to get him to be right. It was at that point where I said, okay, let's just do a huge event. Let's try and create the final R2, the R2 that can last forever. ILM did one version, and then our special effects department in England did another version. It wasn't a spare no expense experiment, but it was an experiment to see if 2 different groups of people could come up with some kind of mechanism to allow him to be a little bit more reliable.
We got 2 wheelchair motors that could push 440 pounds and created the new one, the Uber R2.
We produced a completely different foot and motor drive system to get him to run on sand. And we got him running quite nicely in Tunisia.
Is this the American one?
Yeah.
I'll just have to run him over and wreck it, otherwise he put me out of business. This is the other R2, is it?
Yes.
And they both, without consulting each other, came up with their own design, which was very similar. Finally, we have the definitive R2 who can do just about anything now. He can go through the sand, over door jams, he can move quickly, but sadly, life isn't perfect. We still have people who have to operate R2 by radio control.
Hello, Daddy, Captain.
Cut. Cut.
They were 75-mile-an-hour winds. We're not sure the roads are here. Do be careful.
They're trying to clean up here on the location of 10-4.
As we drove back to the hotel after our 3rd day of shooting, I saw some lightning in the far distance. I was kind of alarmed by the lightning, but I figured it would pass during the evening. Sat down to dinner, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose.
لا هو في الأول معناها جاء رمل ونسمع.
At the beginning, there were wind and the sand blew up.
It's going to be very, very, very hot today.
And we couldn't get radio contact with our security guards because they were holed up in the toilet.
نحن تخبينا فهمتوا ولا معناها في التواليت كرمك الله.
And they all ran to the toilet and they shut themselves in the toilet.
It's just incredible. It's like 4 months work. I mean, the main thing here is not to have panic and everybody just to be running all over the place. I think we have to head up little teams of people and work methodically through it. Otherwise it'll be chaos and people will be just ripping things up.
This is grim. This is seriously grim. But not undoable. It was devastating. You know, I figured maybe the tents would have been gone, but everything was gone. Let's get in here with Trish.
Remove the wall from the roof. Push the roof into the middle with the poles and pull the wall off, and then you'll find your belongings underneath.
You guys got the manpower, though, for the moment?
Well,
I think
for the
if we
moment,
get through
yes,
this,
we're
yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. Liam's wig, how's that?
They're working on it. They're still finding bits and pieces.
All right.
Their moustaches and stuff.
It's only one piece.
No, it's not.
Is it? The engine sets, look at that. That is grim. I think this is going to take all your skills. This is what digital technology is for. It's a tool.
There it is.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, that one's...
The engine sets, look at that. This is grim.
Yeah.
We have Anakin. These are his engines, which play the most crucial part in the movie.
Right.
They're split in two, which doesn't look good. And then this is the scumbag of the universe, and his engines are completely split. Yeah, this is heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
Thank God this beauty's okay, though.
Okay, that's understood.
That's amazing that one is the only one that really survived.
Yeah.
It's the Force.
Say again, Rick.
The pods are really split badly, so we're going to have to really work hard to get those. I think that's going to have to push that right down to the end of the schedule. Over.
10-4.
And any news on Liam's wig? Is that all taking place? Can we win on this one? Over.
Yeah, Rick, they're trying to clean it up here on the location. But at the moment, we still haven't tracked down Liam's beard.
Check Algeria. Over. It's more for Cass than anybody else. Yeah. We have a charter plane, and we are leaving. Yeah. We have a charter plane. Nothing's going to stop us. And if we have to work on our rest day, we're going to have to work on the rest day. Because I don't want them on any level pimping out on us. All right, I think, you know, again, if we push this back to the end, I mean, if we can live with Anakin working on one engine, we've got the replacement pod, which is in good shape. This is pretty good shape. There's a little battering, but nothing that can't be fixed up. This piece we can...
Because of all the chaos and everything, we got off to a late start. Hopefully we'll get this next sequence finished, and then we're only about one shot behind. And then we have to rearrange the schedule. But I think we'll go through this all right. Exact same thing happened in Star Wars. It's always something. Because of all the chaos and everything, we got off to a late start.
Ready, Benny? Thank you. Okay. Here we go. That's right.
Luckily, we had this one set that we could still continue to shoot on. Pushing the pod race to the very end of the schedule. We never lost a beat after that, and we walked out of Tunisia the exact day that we were supposed to. I love shooting on location. I mean, that's my favorite. If you're working on a stage, it's always achievable. But when you're on location, you never know what's going to happen.
Now, do you need that one down, George? Do you think they'll get away? They want here? Yeah. Yes, we do. We do? No problem. Can you get the local boys just to get that one last pod down, the red one over here?
When we finally did shoot the pods, I volunteered to shoot a wide shot of the scene from a crane. One of the things that I could see that was so wonderful was not only all of our pods rebuilt, but beyond that sand dune was our whole base camp, which had been completely rebuilt. And to see it all working, seeing the second unit about a half a mile away actually shooting, seeing the first unit prepping for our biggest scene in the movie, it was joy. It was pure bliss. I hit the mountaintop. Perfect day.